Thank you all for that music this morning. Let's turn one more time to the book of Nahum. We're going to finish this up here today. Over the past 5 weeks, we have been looking at this vision of what it looks like, how it is described when God comes across the threshold of heaven and brings divine justice or divine judgment into the physical world. This is what's happening with the empire of Assyria here, and we are finishing up. This is the second part of really the close, or the second part of the answer to the question: when does the end come for a nation? When does the end come for a people? When does God decide that it is time for Him, with His power and His abilities, to bring that type of judgment for a sinful people? If you remember, last week we started this with a conversation, and we ended it by showing that the people, Assyria, and even people today, they have a divine enemy when they make an enemy of God. You look at the end of our text from last week, Nahum chapter 3, verse 11. God tells them, "You will be drunken, you will go into hiding, you will seek a refuge from the enemy." And this enemy is God. And so as the people, as the nation, makes themselves an enemy of God by not just by their sinfulness, because we're all sinful, we all mess up, we all make mistakes, and yes, we all rebel against God. But when they fail to recognize God as the one they need to repent to, the one they need to ask forgiveness from, the one that they recognize ultimately has their fate in His hand, this is when they make themselves an enemy of God, and God, in His power and His judgment and His righteousness, will come against this people. And throughout this study, God has reminded me and reminded me through His Word that He is the ultimate decider. He is the ultimate authority when it comes to even the affairs of the world. Even when it comes to the rise and the fall of nations. Even when it comes to the rise and the fall of individuals. God is the great decider. He is the ultimate authority. He is the ultimate judge. Nothing happens in the physical world. So nothing happens in our lives. Nothing happens anywhere in the world where God either doesn't allow it to happen. We usually think about this with the negative things, the bad things about living in a sinful world. But at the same time, the good things or the positive things that happens in the world, none of that happens without God also allowing it. And most of the time, He has His hand on it. God is certainly full of judgment. He's full of righteousness. He's full of wrath, jealousy. These are just some of the attributes we saw in Nahum chapter 1. But if you look at how God has taken part and been a part of our lives individually, He has done far more good for us than He has exercised judgment on us. He has done far more for our benefit than He has to try and discipline us in some way to bring us back to Him. And so it is a balance. It is a contrast, so to speak. But at the same time, there is no time in our life where we can't look at something bad that's happened or something that we think of as negative. And if we're really honest with ourselves, you know what? In some way, we probably deserve that. In some way, this is just a result of us being imperfect somewhere down the line, and we're sort of having to deal with the consequences of that. At the same time, anything good that happens, God has His hand on it. He is the ultimate decider. He is the final authority. As a person of faith, and you probably feel the same way, I can look at the world and I can be very disappointed in a lot of the things going on in our world. Not just now, but throughout my entire lifetime. And just wish people would do things differently. Wish even the people of God, as the one holy church of Jesus Christ, that we would do things differently. That we would have more love for each other. Not even just the way that we present ourselves to those outside the church, but that we would just have more love for each other. And it can be very disappointing, but never once have I asked, is God still with us? That, does God still exist? Does He still have His hand on us? Because just as Nahum has reminded me, as we've been reading through this, we should always question ourselves before we question God. We should always question the things that are going on in our lives before we question the providence and we question the decision-making of God and how He is active in our lives. We should always look at ourselves first. God is coming to the nation of Judah here because they have finally started to come back to Him. It's not just because the Assyrians are so evil. It's not just because they have already enslaved the northern kingdom of Israel and they are exercising authority over the southern kingdom of Judah. It's not just because of them. It's also because His people have finally started to make their way and recognize that He is their God. He is their great provider. He is their sustainer. And so before we question anything about God, we should always look towards ourselves. The only hope that we have in this world, we cannot be the solution. We are, at best, we can hope to not add to the problem because we're all imperfect and we're all sinful. So everything going on in the world today, we can't, I think it's a popular saying to don't be part of the problem, be part of the solution. But as we think about it theologically and salvifically, we cannot be the solution. There's only one person, one thing that can be the solution, and that is Jesus Christ. And so at best, what we can hope for is to not add to the problem, but to also point other people towards the solution. To point other people around us, inside the church and outside the church, to Jesus Christ as the solution. This is the only hope that we have in our world today, in our fallen world today. Any other option, trying to be the solution in any other way, is going to do nothing but bring God's wrath. Wrath as a people and wrath as a nation. This is what is happening to the Assyrians. This is what we're going to finish up looking at today that we've been looking at over the past 5 weeks. In our text, we're going to see 3 reasons that God's wrath is brought upon the Assyrians. And let's make sure that we do not repeat these mistakes in our own families, as individuals, or as a nation. These 3 reasons that God is bringing wrath and closing out this. This is almost like the last chapter of Nahum chapter 3 is almost like a funeral dirge. If these songs or some of these ballads that are they're sometimes culturally sung at funerals. This is very popular in places like New Orleans and things like this. But this is almost like a funeral dirge. Like you're already dead, you just don't know it yet. And so this is the final word from God. And so as we read this here today, let's sort of think about that. This is the word from God. The end has already come. It's just not upon them yet. All right. So starting in verse 12, this is what it says. This is God's last word to the Assyrians, His last word of judgment to this nation. All your fortresses are like fig trees with first ripe figs. If shaken, they will fall into the mouth of the eater. Behold, your troops are women in your midst. The gates of your land are wide open to your enemies. Fire has devoured your bars. Draw water for the siege. Strengthen your forts. Go into the clay. Tread the mortar. Take hold of the brick. There will the fire devour you. The sword will cut you off. It will devour you like the locust. Multiply yourself like the locust. Multiply like the grasshopper. You increased your merchants more than the stars of the heavens. The locust spread its wings and flies away. Your princes are like grasshoppers. Your scribes like clouds of locusts settling on the fences in the cold of day. Then when the sun rises, they fly away. No one knows where they are. Your shepherds are asleep. O king of Assyria, your nobles slumber. Your people are scattered on the mountains with none to gather them. There is no easing your hurt. Your wound is grievous. All who hear the news about you clap their hands over you. For upon whom has not come your unceasing evil? If we look at this, starting in verse 12, we see the Assyrians' fortresses, and they are described as ripe fig trees ready to fall. This is a huge difference from the end of chapter 2, where God reminds them, and through Nahum reminds them that they were once thought of as lions. They were once thought of as the most powerful of any nation, the most powerful of any individuals, the mightiest warriors. And now their fortresses, the walls that guard them, are compared to ripe fig trees that you don't even have to go up and pick the fruit. All you have to do is just sort of bump the tree a little bit, and they'll fall off. I remember my grandfather, my dad's dad. He had these trees in his yard on his property, and they were these little itty bitty crabapple trees, and nobody really ate the apples, but they were all over the property. And whenever we would go and we would be playing outside, there would be more apples on the ground than there would be on the tree, because when they got ripe, I mean, it didn't take anything, and they would just fall off. They would just fall down. And so we would take the apples, and we didn't eat them, but we threw them at each other, and we would chase each other around with them. We would see who could throw them the farthest, and that sort of thing. But this is what I think about when he's describing these fig trees, that literally you don't even have to pick them. You just have to go up and shake them, and it'll fall into the mouth of the eater. They're so fragile, is what he's saying. They become so ripe that they're so fragile that they're not holding on to the branch anymore. And just like that, it's not going to take a whole lot of effort. It's not going to take a great large army for them to come into Assyria, come into the capital of Nineveh, and knock over these fortresses and knock over these walls, because the time has come. The time is right. You have officially reached the point where it's not going to be you against another nation. It's going to be you against God, and God has weakened your defenses. God has empowered your enemies. And it's not going to take much effort for them to overcome you. You are like ripened fig trees. And he says the same thing about their soldiers, who were also once like lions, in Nahum chapter 2, are now compared to women. And this is not necessarily correct in the context of our world. I saw a story just last week of they had the first female pilot to fly an F-35, which is the newest combat strike fighter in the Air Force, flying an F-35 combat mission, fully loaded, armed, and ready combat mission in an F-35. And so, in our context, this is a little bit lost, because we still, our military is filled with men and women, people of all ages, and that sort of thing. But in the context of Nahum's writing, it was only the men, the mighty men, the strong men, are the ones who took part in battle. And instead of these lions that they were described as in Nahum chapter 2, they become like women. They become afraid. They become ones who are not armed, who are not prepared, who are not trained for battle, and they're easily overcome. And so we see this great separation between Nahum chapter 3 at the end, as we're coming to the end of this judgment and destruction, as to what they were once perceived as perceived as being this great and powerful nation, and now they're fragile, like ripened fig trees. They are unprepared and untrained and incapable of making war, as if their warriors were all women. And they had put their faith and their hope and everything that they believed in these things of the world. And this is really where the sinfulness comes in. They had the great power of the world, but they had made a divine enemy. They had made an enemy of somebody who is not of the world, of somebody who is greater than the world. They should put their faith in God and not in these worldly things. Because faith in the world is what will bring God's wrath and will bring God's destruction. When we place our hope and our trust and our faith in something that is in the world and not in God, then that we are inviting God's wrath to come against us. We are almost inviting a challenge to God. We're saying that we have these powerful walls. We have these powerful warriors. We have all these things that the world tells us will make us successful. And so we are inviting you to try. We are challenging you to try and come and take over us. Try and defeat us, because we are so strong. These are the things of the world. They place a great amount of importance in their armies and their wealth, in their bank accounts, and the good life. And if we're not careful, we do the same thing, even as the church, even as the people of God. We put so much importance in the fact that, especially as Americans, we are protected by a great military. As Americans, we have a good economy where our bank accounts are filled. Even the poorest among us in America is among the richest in the world. We run into the problem of comparing ourselves constantly to our neighbor and what our neighbor has, but the truth is the poorest of the people in America is still among the richest in the world, among the richest of all of God's people who God sees and who God loves equally. And if we are not careful, we can put our faith and our trust in these things and think to ourselves, because we have a strong military and because we have money and because we have these different things, that we cannot be hurt. And just in my lifetime, that has proven to be false. I was thinking about the ways in which we put our faith in power, and the ways in which we put our faith in might, in the same way that the Assyrians did, in the same way that a lot of other countries throughout history have, a lot of other countries today still do. And I just think about, in my lifetime, I can think of numerous things that have caused us to feel unsafe, even with the power that we do have. And a couple of the ones that I thought about were, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. I know that if I remember, I know that y'all do. Well, maybe not some of y'all, but I know that most of y'all remember the Unabomber. Most of y'all remember Oklahoma City. I remember that very well, the Oklahoma City bombing, 9/11, and then the Boston Marathon bombings just a few years ago. I mean, these acts that we, prior to the day that they happened, most of us didn't think they were even possible. We didn't think that they were, that anybody, could, whether it was a country or just a couple of people, could have made us feel so unsafe, or made us feel like, this could have happened to any of us. This could have happened at any time. It could have happened anywhere. And so just because we have a great military power, and just because we have a great military might, and just because our economy is so good, and just because we have, again, even if we don't necessarily feel like it sometimes, we look at the rest of the world and we realize that we actually are wealthy. We actually are, rich people monetarily in the eyes of the world. It does not mean that we are completely safe. It does not mean that we put all of our faith and our hope and our trust in the things of the world. We should prepare our armies and our military and our police and those people who keep us safe. We should make sure that we are preparing ourselves monetarily for the future, and so that we can take care of our families. But we don't put all of our faith and all of our trust in these things, because when we do, these things can easily be taken away. Even our safety, even our security, even the things that we hold so dear. Jesus tells us in the Gospels very clearly. He says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, because moth and rust destroy, and thieves will break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, nor thieves do not break in and steal." Jesus urges that we store up treasures. We place our importance. We think of the things that are most valuable to us. These should be the things of heaven. These should be the things of God. They should not be the things of the world. Because, not just because the things of the world are not permanent, just because the things of the world don't last, but because they're easily destroyed. They are easily taken away from us. No matter who we are, it is capable for us to have these things lost, completely lost, even while we're here on the earth. Not to mention the fact that as we die, which is going to happen to everybody, that we don't get to take these things with us. It's only the eternal things, these things that are eternally important, that we should focus on, and we should remind ourselves, and we should remind our families, remind everybody around us that this is what our focus should be. This is what our focus should always be. Put our faith in the things of heaven, not in the things of the world. Because when we put our faith in the things of the world, again, we are inviting a challenge from God. We're inviting God's wrath, because we are saying, you are not the most important thing to me. In my list of priorities, God, you are not on the top. You are somewhere near the middle, or you're somewhere at the bottom. And when that happens, we invite God, if we are the the people of God, we invite God's discipline to show us that's not true, to change our minds. We invite God's wrath, just like it came upon the nation of Israel, his people, just like it came upon the nation of Judah, his people. Because they did not prioritize him at the top. They put their faith in the things of the world. We put our faith in and trust in God. The world will still come against us. We may still lose some worldly things, but we will not lose the things of heaven, the eternal things. For the Assyrians, it wasn't just their walls. It wasn't just their armies that they were getting ready to lose. It was also their money. It was also the things that they put great importance in monetarily. It says here in verse 16, it talks about their merchants. It says, you increased your merchants more than the stars of the heavens. You look at the people that would bring goods and money into your economy, they numbered more than the stars of the heavens. This is what the empire of Syria looked like. And as we think about the world today, guys, we've got to make sure that this is not what we think of when we think of our own country and our own people, because never, certainly not in my life and not in your life, never in the history of the world has goods, have the things that we want been so readily available for us. We have the ability, if you just think about the last few months and a lot of the things that we enjoy, we have the ability to not even have to go to a store. We can be secluded in our own homes and order things, whether we call somebody on the phone or we get on the computer or get online and order something and have it brought to us. This is, if the description of Assyria was that their merchants were more than the stars of the sky, think about what the description of our world today would be. Where we don't have to go to the market to buy things. Where we don't even have to interact with people in order to get the things that we want and get the things that we need. And if that had caused them to put so much of their faith and so much of their importance, again, their priorities, into the things of their economy and the things that they could give for themselves, how much more is it a danger for us that we do the same thing? That we think to ourselves, you know what? Even the doctor. I mean, they've even got the doctor you can call on the phone now. The teledoc, where you don't even have to go to the doctor's office. You can just call them up, hey, doc, my throat hurts and I'm sick, and say, okay, I'll call you in some medicine. And then you can even have that delivered to your house. How much more are we in danger of thinking to ourselves that we do not need God in our life? Because we have so many other people, and we have so many other things that can just bring us what we need. How much are we in danger of believing that we do not need God? We do not need the things of heaven. But just like the merchants who were more than the stars of the heaven, who at time of tribulation, when trouble came, they were like locusts who spread their wings and fly away. In swarms, they were gone. They vanished. Their economy disappeared overnight. How much more should we put our faith in the things of God? Even with everything else going on, it's hard. We still got to remember we got an election coming up in a few months, and as it gets closer to that, you're going to hear more and more about the economy. Why every political cycle, every time there's an election, whether it's a major election, whether it's a midterm, we always talk about the economy, because we care about our money. It's something that we want to know what you're going to do for me to put more money in my pocket. That's important to us, but it cannot be the most important thing to us. Honestly, I think that we need to concentrate more on what we spend our money on than we do how much money is actually in our pocket, how much money is actually in our bank account. Because it's the truth of the Bible, and when we look at the truth of what judgment actually is and what God's wrath actually is, we need to realize that every second of every day, every penny that we have ever spent, we're going to have to give an account for God why we did that. Why we chose to spend money on this and not something else. Why we chose to spend our time on this and not something else. We're going to have to give God an account for that, because life is the most precious gift that God has given us. The Assyrian people have just absolutely given away all of the things that are important to embrace the things that are unimportant. Their security, their economy, their power, their money. In the same way that they put their trust and their hope in worldly things, they also put their faith in worldly people. See, this is a description of the Syrian people. It says, your princes, your rulers, are like grasshoppers. Your scribes are like clouds of locusts, soaring on the fences in the day of cold, and when the sun rises, they fly away. No one knows where they are. Your shepherds are asleep, O king of Assyria. Your nobles slumber. Your people are scattered on the mountains with none to gather them. They have no leaders. Why do they have no leaders? Because they ran away. They don't care about their people. Again, all they care about, all the leaders care about, in the same way that a lot of their people, all they care about was their own security and their own money. They were mighty men. They were people of great power and people of great wealth. But again, when tribulation comes, the princes, the shepherds, the rulers, the caretakers, the nobles, they scatter and they run for cover. And this is not the calling, this is not the job that God has put them in. God has ordained them over the people for a righteous reason, to care for the people when they run away. So unfaithful authorities will bring God's wrath. In the same way that sinfulness, in the same way that putting your faith in worldly things, unfaithful authorities will invite God's wrath upon a nation and upon a people. We know that Nahum is speaking about authorities here, not just from the description of princes, but from the description of shepherds. Shepherds, it says, are asleep. Now, the shepherds in the Old Testament and New Testament both, this is the term of choice for the ones who God has entrusted to watch over the people, to watch over those who are in their care. And instead of being the good shepherd, instead of being the one who would willingly sacrifice himself for the flock, these people scatter. They run away. They are unfaithful authorities. They are authorities who, it is very clear when trouble comes that they care only about themselves. And again, we're in a political cycle, so I'm trying not to get too political here, but I do want to put one example here of what it actually looks like to recognize worldly authority, but also recognize godly authority. And this is from Jesus Christ as he stood before Pontius Pilate. Here in John chapter 19, Pilate asked him. Pilate said to Jesus, this is the second time that Jesus has come before Pilate. Pilate asked him, you will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have the authority to release you or the authority to crucify you? And Jesus answered, you would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given to you from above. This is the correct recognition when we think about authority in the world. Is that God has ultimate authority, but the people who have authority over us would have none if it wasn't the work of God, if it wasn't the plan, somehow the overreaching plan of God. The only authority that any leader has comes from God. And therefore, all leaders, no matter who they are, no matter what country they serve, no matter what people they serve, all leaders should respect God, honor God, and seek to please God in their life. But you and I both know that they don't. Even those who are from quote-unquote Christian nations don't always look to God and seek to respect God and to honor God and to please God. And it's odd because, over the past few years, I have had conversations with people, true story, I've had conversations with people who thought that President Barack Obama was one of the most God-honoring presidents that we've ever had in our country. And then a few years later, we've had some people who said they thought that President Donald Trump, was one of the most God-honoring presidents that we've ever had in the history of our country. And for me, I just want to cry because I think that anybody who thinks that either one of those people are God-honoring presidents don't have any idea what a God-honoring president actually looks like. To actually respect God, honor God, and seek to please God with everything that they do. And here again, I'm an equal opportunity offender. I think that it's not Democrats and it's not Republicans. It is all authorities that we would not even know what it looked like because it's so rare to see somebody who respects God, honor God, and seeks to please God with their life. And for Assyria, they're not even close. Not even close to that, because when trouble comes, their rulers scatter. If the example that we have in everything that we do in our life, whether that's as individuals who, in the grand scheme of America, don't matter that much, or if it's the top leadership, the example that we have from Christ is of a leader who is willing to give themselves, who is willing to humble themselves, to be humiliated, all for the purpose of saving and for the good of their people. This is the leader who respects God, honors God, and seeks to please God with their life. But what we have in Assyria, what we largely have in our world today, is unfaithful authorities who seek to please themselves, honor themselves, and to only gain things for themselves. We have control over our faithfulness to God and no one else's, and so therefore we should put our focus and our priority in God and no one else, not in any of these other leaders. And that brings us to the last thing in our text that invites God's wrath. And look at what the Assyrians' sinfulness brought into their own nation. It says there is no easing your hurt. Your wounds are grievous. There's nothing that can be done at this point, basically. It's just like I said earlier. You're dead, you just don't know it yet. You're defeated, you just don't know it yet. There's no easing your hurt. All who hear the news about you clap their hands over you. For upon whom has not come your unceasing evil? So everybody who hears that the Assyrians are defeated, everyone who hears that the Assyrians are humiliated, the Assyrians are overcome in battle, that vast numbers of Assyrian soldiers have died, everyone who hears this claps their hands. I mean, they're just happy. That's the only emotion that they have. It's just pure joy, pure happiness. Why? Because there's not a single nation that their unceasing evil has not come against. They have shown love and compassion and respect to nobody. And so when their end comes, everybody's just happy. This is the opposite to me of when it tells us in the Gospels that there is great joy and there is great cheering in heaven for one unbeliever who comes back to God. This is the opposite. Because here there is great joy and there is great cheering on earth for this kingdom who everybody has been killed and everybody has been destroyed. Why? Because there is a total lack of love within this nation and among this people. There's nothing but contempt. There's nothing but hate. And so, as an individual, as a nation, or as a people, lack of love will bring God's wrath. It invites God's wrath to come upon us. Unlike the people of God who John 13:35 tells us that we will be identified by our love for others. This is our defining characteristic. You know, if you say to yourself, people should know by my life that I'm a Christian. People should know by my life that I'm a follower of Christ. What is that going to look like? It's going to mean that you genuinely love other people. You're not out to prove yourself wrong or yourself right and them wrong. You're not out to gain more money for yourself by taking it from them. You are going to love other people. This is our defining characteristic. But this nation had no love. They invited God's wrath to come upon them because as individuals and as a nation, they had no love for anybody else, for anybody around them. As we think about this, as we're closing out this series, as we're closing out with what it looks like for God's wrath to come upon a nation and a people, we have to ask ourselves, what is our nation defined as? Is our nation defined as a nation of love? I mean, no. You know, it's not even really a question. No. We do a lot to help out other countries. We send a great deal of money. Even throughout our history, we have backed them militarily whenever somebody was trying to come against them. So have we done good things for other nations? Absolutely. But are we a nation of love? No. Why? Because we can't stop fighting amongst ourselves. We can't stop trying to take from each other. We can't stop trying to fight each other. You know, how can we possibly love somebody else? How can we possibly be identified as a nation of love if we can't even love each other? At least the Assyrians were gathering wealth and were gathering power for themselves, for their native peoples. They were cruel and they were brutal to every other nation around them, but at least they loved themselves. But we're just content to every 4 years, beat up on each other and tell each other that if you don't believe what I do, then it's because you're wrong. It's because you must be an evil person. We must do everything that we can to destroy you. That's not a nation of love. We are followers of Christ, but just like everybody else, we have the capacity to be wrong. We are imperfect. We have the capacity to put our faith in our military or in our power. We have the capacity to put our faith in our money or in the things that the world says is good or best or successful. We have the capacity to turn away from God even as the people of God. And how do we stop that? How do we make sure that our brothers and sisters are not falling into that? It's got to start with love. The lack of love is what is going to bring God's wrath. If we're not careful, it's going to invite the challenge for God to judge us because we have no compassion, we have no love for others. So as we finish this up, as we close out this series, let us remember that we can be hurt, we can be made poor, we can be made sick. We can have the very freedoms that we love taken away by the authorities that we trust. But nothing can take away our hope, nothing can take away our faith, and nothing can take away our love as the people of God. And when we do those things, when we hope in God, we have faith in God, and when we genuinely love God, then we will work with God, and we will not invite His judgment to come against us as individuals, as families, or as a nation. We will serve Him, not be the object of His wrath. Thank you, guys. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we do ask for your guidance. We do not want to be the subject of your judgment. We do not want to be the focal point of your wrath. We want to be those who you can use. We want to be the vessels that you can use to bring good in the world, to take this message of hope and love, to take the message of salvation through Jesus Christ to others. But we can't do that when we're so focused on ourselves. We can't do that when we're focused on the things of the world. And so help us to see clearly what is most important. Help us to see clearly what is most needed in our world. It's not for us to have more power. It's not for us to have more money. We want to be taken care of and be safe, and we certainly want to have the resources that we need to take care of our family. But what is most important is the faith that we put in you. It's the love that we have for each other. And so just help change our minds, help to refocus our priorities away from what the world or the media or the news or whatever tells us is most important, but back to your word, back to the Holy Scriptures of what that tells us is really important. And if we can do that, if we can refocus ourselves as individuals and refocus ourselves as people, then we can be used by you for a great purpose. And so we're asking that here today. Use us for a great purpose so that we will not be like the Assyrian Empire that saw your judgment, but we can be a new people, a new nation who serves you, who glorifies you, who honors you, and who seeks to please you with our lives. As individuals, as families, and as a nation. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.